My name is Eleanor Richardson, and at 63, I thought I'd seen everything life could throw at a mother of three. But the day I deliberately wore my gardening clothes and played up my southern accent to meet my son David's fiancée, Heather's wealthy family changed everything. I pretended to be a simple, financially struggling widow to test their true character. What I never expected was to uncover their elaborate facade hiding a crumbling empire, or that my little test would eventually save my son from financial ruin and expose a family whose polished exterior masked a rot far deeper than my deliberately muddied boots. Before I share how my little charade unfolded, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. If this story of family deception and motherly instinct resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life family drama stories. Now, let me take you back to when I first decided to put on this performance. David has always been my middle child, sandwiched between his older sister Margaret, a cardiothoracic surgeon, and his younger brother Thomas, who made his fortune in tech startups before 30. While both of his siblings charged ahead with unwavering confidence, David took a more thoughtful approach to life. He's brilliantly creative with an architect's eye that can transform spaces in ways that still amaze me, but he's always carried this shadow of insecurity when comparing himself to his siblings' more traditional success. I built my interior design business from nothing after my husband Robert passed away 15 years ago. What started as me helping neighbors redecorate their living rooms turned into Richardson Interiors, one of the most sought-after design firms in Nashville. My clients include country music, stars, and business executives who pay premium prices for my eye for detail and authentic designs. I worked hard to provide for my children after becoming a widow, and I'm proud of the success I've built. I never hid my accomplishments, but I also taught my children that character matters more than bank accounts. When David first brought Heather Blackwood home 6 months ago, something about her set off my internal alarms. She was beautiful, poised, and sophisticated with her sleek blonde bob and perfectly tailored clothes. Her posture spoke of finishing schools and debutante balls, but beneath her polite smiles, I sensed something calculating in the way she cataloged every item in my home with her eyes. "Mother," she'd say, drawing out the word with practiced charm, "what a lovely antique sideboard. Is that a Duncan Fife original?" Or, she'd casually mention, "The Vanderbilts have similar crystal in their summer home. Daddy took us there for a weekend last year." The name-dropping was incessant. The Cabots, the Kennedys, winter in Aspen, summer in the Hamptons. Her father, Richard's investment portfolio, her mother Victoria's charity galas, her brother James's connections to European royalty. After every visit with Heather, I noticed changes in David. My son, who once wore the same comfortable sweater until it had holes, began appearing in designer clothes. His modest apartment suddenly needed upgrading. He started mentioning country clubs and vacation properties. 4 months into their relationship, David proposed with a ring that I suspected cost more than his car. When he called to tell me they were visiting her family in Boston the following month, he sounded nervous. "Mom, the Blackwoods are." "Well, they're pretty high society. Heather's worried you might feel out of place." Something in his tone broke my heart. My son was embarrassed by his mother. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my back porch, watching fireflies blink in the gathering darkness. The Blackwoods had never met me, yet they'd already decided I wasn't good enough. And worse, they'd convinced my son to see me through their eyes. The idea came to me suddenly, bold and a little reckless. If the Blackwoods expected a simple, unsophisticated Southern widow, why not give them exactly that? Not just meet their expectations, but exceed them. I'd play the role of a struggling small business owner, running a modest home decor shop, someone naive about wealth and privilege. I'd see how they treated a person they deemed beneath them, reveal their true character to David, and perhaps shake him out of whatever spell these people had cast on him. I spent the next few weeks preparing for my performance. I studied my wardrobe carefully, selecting clothes that were clean but well worn. I removed my designer watch and the diamond earrings Robert had given me on our 10th anniversary, replacing them with costume jewelry. I practiced emphasizing my Southern accent, adding extra syllables to my words, and peppering my speech with folksy expressions my grandmother had used. When David picked me up at the Boston airport, his eyes widened at my appearance. Gone was his always put-together mother, in her tailored slacks and cashmere sweaters. Instead, I wore faded jeans, scuffed boots, and a floral blouse that had seen better days. "Mom, are you okay? What are you wearing?" I patted his cheek. "I'm just fine, sugar. These are my comfortable clothes for travelin'. Didn't want to be all stuffed up on that long flight. But we're going straight to the Blackwoods for dinner," he said, his voice rising with panic. I feigned innocence. "Well, I thought I'd freshen up there before dinner. Is that not all right?" David ran his hand through his hair, a nervous habit from childhood. "There's no time. We're already running late." "Then they'll just have to take me as I am," I said cheerfully. Real folks don't judge by appearances anyway. The drive to the Blackwood estate gave me time to brief David on my backstory. I was no longer the owner of Richardson Interiors, with its wealthy clientele and feature spreads in Southern living. Instead, I ran a small home decor shop called Eleanor's Finds that specialized in budget-friendly makeovers. I was struggling to make ends meet, but too proud to accept help from my children. "Why are you doing this?" David hissed as we pulled through wrought iron gates that opened to reveal a long, tree-lined driveway. "Just being myself, honey," I replied, secretly noting the chipping paint on those impressive gates. "You want me to be comfortable, don't you?" The Blackwood estate was designed to impress. A sprawling colonial revival mansion with white columns and perfectly symmetrical windows. As we crunched up the gravel driveway, I noted other details that told a different story. Faded curtains visible through the windows, landscaping that was just slightly overgrown, a subtle sagging of the front porch railing. Small imperfections my designer's eye couldn't miss. I straightened my shoulders, put on my brightest smile, and prepared to give the performance of my life. The massive oak door swung open before David could ring the bell, revealing a slender man in his early 60s wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit. His silver hair was expertly cut, his smile practiced but not reaching his eyes, which were already assessing me with barely concealed disappointment. "You must be Eleanor," Richard Blackwood said, extending his hand with the automatic precision of someone who's made the gesture thousands of times. "Welcome to our home. My goodness, aren't you just the picture of hospitality?" I gushed, taking his hand in both of mine and shaking enthusiastically. "I'm so pleased to finally meet you. Heather has told us so much about her daddy." Richard's smile tightened as he extricated his hand from my grip. "Yes, well, everyone's waiting in the drawing room. Please, come in." The entrance hall was impressive, with a sweeping staircase and crystal chandelier. I made a show of gasping and turning in a circle. Land sakes, this is like something out of those fancy magazines. "David, honey, did you ever think your mama would be standing in such a grand place?" David's face had taken on the tight, pained expression of someone with a severe toothache. "Mom, please," he whispered. Richard led us through to what he'd called the drawing room, a formal space with antique furniture arranged for appearance rather than conversation. My expert eye immediately recognized several pieces as good reproductions rather than the authentic antiques they were meant to suggest. Interesting. Victoria Blackwood rose from a silk-upholstered chair, her movements as practiced as her husband's. She was thin to the point of severity, with blonde hair pulled into a chignon so tight it seemed to function as an instant facelift. Her black cocktail dress was designer, last season's Chanel if I wasn't mistaken. "Eleanor, welcome," she said, air-kissing near my cheek. "We've been so looking forward to meeting you." "The pleasure's all mine, Mrs. Blackwood," I said, adding a little curtsy that made David wince behind me. "Victoria, please," she corrected, her smile never warming her eyes. She gestured toward the others in the room. "Our son James and our daughter Elizabeth." James Blackwood was a younger version of his father, from the carefully styled hair to the expensive watch displayed prominently on his wrist as he raised his whiskey glass in greeting. "Charmed," he said without getting up. Elizabeth, tall and sleek like her mother, gave me a tight smile. "Hello, Mrs. Richardson. Oh, please call me Eleanor, or even Ellie. All my friends back home do." "Mother!" Heather rushed forward, hugging me stiffly. She looked stunning in a cream silk blouse and tailored pants, but her eyes held panic as she took in my appearance. "I'm so glad you made it safely. How was your flight? Bumpier than a hay wagon on a country road?" I laughed. But the nice flight attendant kept my coffee cup full, so I can't complain. Victoria's eyebrow twitched. "Shall we move to the dining room? Henderson has prepared dinner." The dining room was formal and cold, with dark paneling and heavy curtains that blocked much of the natural light. A chandelier illuminated a table that could have seated 20, though it was set for only 7. I noticed the sterling silver flatware was tarnished in places, and the linen tablecloth had a barely visible stain near one corner. As we took our seats, I deliberately selected the wrong fork for my salad and watched Victoria's eye twitch again. "So, Eleanor," Richard began once we were served, checking his Rolex, "Heather tells us you run some sort of home decor shop?" "That's right. Eleanor's Finds, over on Magnolia Street. Nothing fancy, but we help folks make their homes pretty on a budget. I always say, you don't need a fortune to have a fortunate home." Victoria took a large sip of her wine. "How quaint. What sort of inventory do you carry?" Elizabeth asked, her tone suggesting she was gathering information rather than showing genuine interest. "Oh, a little bit of everything. Second-hand furniture I fix up with some paint, throw pillows I sew myself, picture frames, knickknacks, whatever catches my eye at estate sales and flea markets." James smirked. "So, you're a junk dealer?" "James," Heather hissed. "I like to think of it as treasure hunting," I replied cheerfully. "One person's trash and all that." "And is this business profitable?" Richard asked. I sighed dramatically. "Well, it keeps the lights on most months. Times are tough for small businesses these days, what with those big box stores selling everything so cheap. But I get by." The Blackwoods exchanged glances, and I could practically see them downgrading David's value in their mental ledgers. No wealthy mother-in-law to tap for resources. Throughout dinner, I played up my character, expressing wide-eyed wonder at what I called fancy foods. The overcooked beef Wellington and underseasoned vegetables would never have passed inspection in my kitchen. Using the wrong utensils and talking too loudly about topics Victoria clearly found distasteful. So there I was, elbow-deep in stripping paste, trying to salvage this old dresser when my neighbor Mabel comes running over because her cat got stuck in the drainage pipe again. Victoria grimaced as though physically pained. Richard kept checking his watch and his phone, excusing himself twice for calls he claimed were urgent business matters. The second time, I heard him in the hallway, his voice tense. "I understand the terms, but we need to extend the deadline." "Yes, I'm aware of the consequences." When he returned, his complexion was slightly gray beneath his country club tan. Heather was increasingly mortified, attempting to salvage the conversation by redirecting it toward David's recent architectural award. "David's firm was just recognized for their innovative sustainable design approach," she said desperately. "The prize was quite substantial, wasn't it, darling?" I noticed how intently all the Blackwoods suddenly focused on my son. "It was just a regional award," David said modestly. "But with a $50,000 prize," Heather added quickly. "How wonderful," Richard said, his interest visibly increased. "And I imagine there will be more such lucrative opportunities in your future." "The firm has several major projects in development," David acknowledged. "David's always been so talented," I interjected. "Even as a little boy, he'd build the most amazing structures with his blocks. Course, his brother Tommy's the one who made the real money with his computer company. And Margaret with her doctor business. Saving lives and all." James leaned forward. "Your other children are successful?" I nodded enthusiastically. "Oh my, yes. Tommy sold his startup for millions before he was 30. And Margaret's one of those heart surgeons, very in demand. They both keep trying to help their poor old mama financially. But I'm too proud to take handouts, even from my own children." This information rippled through the room like a stone dropped in still water. I watched as the family recalculated their approach. "How admirable," Victoria said, her voice warming slightly. "Family is so important." By the end of dinner, I'd noticed several more inconsistencies. Despite the mansion and the trappings of wealth, there were signs of financial strain everywhere. The slightly worn upholstery on the dining chairs, the way the staff had been reduced to a single harried housekeeper who served and cleared our meal, the empty spaces on the walls where paintings had clearly once hung. Most telling was the Blackwoods' intense interest in David's career trajectory and earning potential. They weren't vetting him as a suitor, they were assessing him as an asset. As we moved to the sitting room for coffee, I accidentally knocked over my water glass, creating a diversion that allowed me to observe James whispering urgently to his father. If Winters pulls out, we need another option. My maternal instincts, already on high alert, shifted into overdrive. These people weren't just snobs, they were desperate, and somehow my son had become their target. After coffee, I asked Victoria where I might powder my nose, using the deliberately outdated phrase to reinforce my character. She directed me upstairs, giving me the perfect opportunity to do a little investigating. "Second door on the right," she instructed, barely concealing her relief at my temporary absence. I deliberately took a wrong turn, moving slowly down the hallway of the second floor. The carpet runner was threadbare in spots, and several of the doors were closed. One stood slightly ajar, revealing what appeared to be a bedroom stripped of furniture except for a single bed frame. Curious. Hearing footsteps approaching, I quickly ducked into what turned out to be a bathroom. Several prescription bottles lined the counter. Xanax prescribed to Victoria, Prozac for Elizabeth, blood pressure medication for Richard. The medicine cabinet revealed more anxiety medications and sleeping pills. The Blackwood family was medicating their stress. I flushed the empty toilet and ran the water briefly before stepping back into the hallway, where I nearly collided with a middle-aged woman in a housekeeping uniform. "Oh, excuse me," I said. "No problem, ma'am," she replied with a tired smile. "Are you here about the paintings?" Mr. Blackwood said someone would be coming tomorrow. "The paintings?" Her eyes widened slightly. "I'm sorry. I thought you were." "Never mind. Can I help you find something?" "Just getting my bearings," I replied, then decided to take a risk. "This house is so big, I got turned around looking for the bathroom." "It's easy to get lost," she agreed, relaxing slightly. "Been working here 20 years. Since before they had to let the rest of the staff go." "They had more staff before?" She nodded. "Oh yes. Cook, gardener, full-time driver. But that was before Mr. Blackwood's investment troubles. Such a shame about the artwork being sold. Some of those pieces have been in Mrs. Blackwood's family for generations." Footsteps sounded on the stairs, and the housekeeper straightened. "If you're looking for the bathroom, it's right there," she said, pointing to the door I'd just exited before hurrying away. James appeared at the top of the stairs. "Getting the grand tour?" he asked, his tone suspicious. "Just stretching my legs after that delicious meal," I replied. "I always get a bit stiff after sitting too long. Old bones, you know." He didn't smile. "The family is gathering in the study. Father wants to get to know David better." I followed him down the hallway to a large room lined with bookshelves. Richard sat behind an imposing desk, while David perched uncomfortably on a leather chair opposite him. Victoria and Heather were arranged on a sofa, while Elizabeth stood by the window, scrolling through her phone. "Ah, there you are, Eleanor," Richard said. "We were just discussing David's promising future." "My boy has always been a hard worker," I agreed, settling into an armchair and pulling out my phone. "Oh goodness, would you look at that?" my assistant at the shop just texted. Apparently, the leg broke clean off that walnut side table I was refinishing. As I spoke, I surreptitiously took photos of papers on Richard's desk, angled just enough to be readable from my position. Loan documents, collection notices, a letter from an auction house regarding estate liquidation options. "Business problems?" Richard asked, quickly shuffling the papers into a folder. "Nothing I can't handle," I assured him. "Just the usual small business headaches." The conversation shifted to David's recent architectural projects and his firm's growing reputation. Richard grew increasingly animated as David described a potential contract with a major developer. "That sounds like it could be quite profitable," Richard observed, leaning forward. "I have some contacts in real estate development myself. Perhaps I could make some introductions." "That's very kind, Mr. Blackwood," David replied politely. "Please, call me Richard. We're going to be family after all." The study door opened suddenly, and a distinguished-looking man in his 50s entered without knocking. "Richard, about tomorrow's meeting." He stopped short upon seeing us. "I apologize. I didn't realize you had guests." Richard stood quickly, his face flushing. "Marcus, this is unexpected." "Clearly," the man replied dryly, his eyes taking in the room. "The Harrington papers can't wait. They need your signature tonight if we're going to proceed." "Harrington?" I echoed innocently. "Not Harrington Development Group?" Why, they're clients of my daughter's husband. Small world. This was a complete fabrication, but I watched Richard and Marcus exchange alarmed glances. I wasn't aware you had connections in real estate development, Eleanor, Richard said carefully. Oh, I don't personally. But my son-in-law Bradley handles their legal work. Corporate restructuring, mainly. Marcus's eyebrows shot up. I wasn't aware Harrington was restructuring. Perhaps I've said too much, I backpedaled, feigning embarrassment. Bradley doesn't usually discuss clients with family, but he did mention the Harrington name recently. I might be confused. Richard practically pushed Marcus toward the door. Let's discuss this in private. As they left, I caught fragments of their heated exchange. Can't afford another setback. And bank won't extend further. When Richard returned, his complexion had that grayish tinge again, but his smile was firmly fixed in place. Where were we? Ah, yes. David's bright future. The evening continued with increasing tension beneath the polite conversation. Victoria drank steadily, her speech becoming slightly slurred. Elizabeth kept checking her watch, clearly eager to escape. James asked increasingly direct questions about David's finances, barely disguising them as friendly interest. As we prepared to leave, Richard pulled David aside for what appeared to be an intense conversation, while Victoria cornered me by the coat closet. Eleanor, she said, her words slightly blurred. I hope you didn't find us too intimidating tonight. Not at all, I assured her. Your home is just lovely, though I did notice some of the furnishings seem to have seen better days. If you're ever interested in budget-friendly updates, my little shop could help. Something flashed in Victoria's eyes, pain, pride, anger before she composed herself. The Blackwood estate has been in my family for generations. Everything you see represents our heritage and standing. Of course, I said gently, seeing the cracks in her facade widening. It must be difficult maintaining such a large property these days. We manage perfectly well, she snapped, then immediately softened her tone. You've raised a wonderful son. Heather is quite taken with him. They do seem happy together. Victoria leaned closer, the scent of expensive perfume and wine heavy on her breath. A good marriage is about more than just happiness. It's about building a legacy, securing the future. Don't you agree? I believe marriage is about partnership and love, I replied carefully. Love, Victoria echoed, her laugh brittle. How charmingly simple. In our circles, Eleanor, marriage has always been a strategic alliance. Heather understands this. Her words chilled me. And does David understand it too? Victoria patted my arm condescendingly. He will. On the drive back to my hotel, David was unusually quiet. Your future father-in-law seems very interested in your career, I observed. David nodded absently. He thinks he can help me secure some major contracts through his connections. That's generous of him. He mentioned a position on their family foundation board, too. Said it comes with a substantial stipend. I chose my words carefully. Sounds like they're eager to welcome you into the family. Richard suggested I consider investing my award money in one of his business ventures. Said it could triple within a year. That set off alarm bells loud enough to wake the dead. Did he now? David glanced over at me. Mom, what was with the act tonight? You embarrassed me in front of Heather's family. I'm sorry if I embarrassed you, honey, I said, genuinely pained by the hurt in his voice. But sometimes people show their true selves when they think they're dealing with someone they can dismiss. The Blackwoods were perfectly polite to you. Polite isn't the same as respectful, I pointed out. And there's something not right about that family, David. I can feel it. He sighed heavily. You don't understand their world, Mom. It's different from ours. I bit back my response, knowing he wasn't ready to hear it. But one thing was certain. I needed to dig deeper into the Blackwood family before my son tied himself to them permanently. The next morning, I arrived at the Blackwood estate dressed much the same as the previous evening, despite David's pleas for me to make more of an effort. The family had invited us for breakfast before our scheduled return to Nashville. Victoria greeted us in the sunroom, looking considerably less polished than she had the night before. Her silk robe was belted loosely over pajamas, and her face, free of makeup, showed the fine lines and dark circles she'd carefully concealed at dinner. Please, help yourselves. She gestured toward a sideboard with pastries and fruit that looked hastily arranged. Henderson usually prepares a hot breakfast, but she's running errands this morning. This looks just perfect, I assured her, noting the store-bought quality of the pastries. No in-house chef, despite Heather's stories about their renowned family cook. Richard arrived, looking distracted, his tie slightly askew. "Good morning, everyone. I apologize, but I'll need to step out briefly for a call." "Another business emergency, dear?" Victoria asked, her tone lightly mocking. Richard shot her a warning glance before exiting with his phone already pressed to his ear. "I decided to test some waters. Heather mentioned you summer in the Hamptons with the Vanderbilts. My client Lucinda Vanderhorst was just telling me about their property there. Do you know the family well?" Victoria's coffee cup paused halfway to her lips. "The Vanderhorst branch?" "Not intimately, no." Heather may have misspoken. "And you're on the board of the Boston Symphony? I believe my friend Marianne Covington chairs that committee now." Another flicker of panic. "I've had to reduce my commitments recently." "Health reasons." James wandered in, looking hungover. "Mother, where's Henderson?" "I need aspirin." "In the medicine cabinet, James," Victoria replied tightly. "You know where it is." As James shuffled out, I turned to Heather. "Your brother seems to work hard. Banking, isn't it?" Heather nodded quickly. "Investment banking. Very demanding." "Which firm?" "My son-in-law might know him professionally. It's a private equity situation." Heather hedged. "Boutique firm." David looked between us, clearly sensing the tension but not understanding its source. I decided to ease off temporarily, turning the conversation to the garden visible through the windows. "Your roses are lovely, Victoria. I've always found gardening so therapeutic. Do you tend them yourself?" Victoria's expression softened genuinely for the first time. "I do, actually. We used to have a gardener, but I've taken it over in recent years. It's one of my few pleasures these days." I recognized the wistfulness in her voice, the nostalgia for better times. "Sometimes the things we do with our own hands bring the most satisfaction," I offered, and she nodded in unexpected agreement. Our moment of connection was interrupted by the doorbell. Victoria frowned. "Who could that be at this hour?" Heather stiffened. "I'll get it. Henderson is out." But before she could move, we heard the front door open and Richard's raised voice. "Marcus, I told you I'd call you back, and yet you haven't returned my calls for 3 days," replied a stern voice. "The bank can't wait any longer, Richard. The Winters Group pulled out completely after your last pitch." Victoria stood abruptly. "I should see what's happening." I touched her arm gently. "Perhaps we should give them privacy for their business discussion." She shot me a grateful look before hurrying toward the hall. Heather followed, leaving David and me alone in the sunroom. "Mom," David whispered urgently. "What's going on? You're acting strange." I met my son's confused gaze. "I think Heather's family might not be what they appear to be." "What do you mean?" Before I could answer, the voices in the hall grew louder. 6 months of extensions already," the visitor was saying. "The board won't approve any more. You either secure new investment or the estate goes to auction next month." "Lower your voice, for God's sake," Richard hissed. "We have guests. Perhaps your guests would like to know they're sitting in a house that's about to be foreclosed upon." Victoria's voice joined the fray. "Richard, do something." "I'm trying, Victoria." "What do you think I've been doing for the past year?" Losing what little we had left, she shot back bitterly. The argument moved farther into the house, but the damage was done. David stared at me in shock. "They're broke," he whispered. "I suspect so," I replied quietly. Heather appeared in the doorway, her face pale but composed. "I'm so sorry about the interruption. Father had an unexpected business matter to attend to." "It sounded serious," I observed gently. "Nothing Father can't handle," she replied automatically, but her eyes told a different story. "Heather," David said, rising from his chair. "What's going on? Is your family in financial trouble?" "Of course not," she insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. From somewhere deeper in the house came the sound of breaking glass, followed by Victoria's sob. Heather closed her eyes briefly. "I should check on Mother." "I'll come with you," I offered, ignoring David's warning glance. We found Victoria in the study, a shattered crystal tumbler at her feet and tears streaming down her face. Richard stood by the window, his back to the room, while James paced nervously. "Mother?" Heather's voice was small. Victoria looked up, her carefully constructed dignity finally collapsing. "It's over," she said flatly. Your father has finally managed to lose everything. Victoria, please. Richard turned, his face ashen. Why hide it anymore? The bank is taking the house, the cars, everything. She laughed bitterly. Maybe Eleanor can give us decorating tips for whatever hovel we end up in. I stepped forward. Victoria, don't, she snapped. Don't you dare pity us. I wasn't going to. I replied quietly. James stopped pacing. There's still the Harrington deal. Richard shook his head. Marcus just confirmed it. Winters pulled out. Without their backing, Harrington won't touch us. There's David, Heather said suddenly, and all eyes turned to her. Heather, Victoria warned. What about David? My son asked, from behind me, his voice hard in a way I'd never heard before. Silence fell over the room, thick with unspoken truths. I took my son's hand and squeezed it. I think, I said carefully, that it's time for David and me to go. Wait. Richard stepped forward. This is all a misunderstanding. Just a temporary cash flow issue. A temporary issue that's lasted 3 years, Victoria muttered. 3 years? David echoed. But Heather told me your family just made a major donation to the art museum last month. The new Blackwood wing, James snorted. The only wing our family could fund right now is on a paper airplane. That's enough, James, Richard snapped. David turned to Heather, his expression stunned. Have you been lying to me all this time? Heather's composure finally cracked. Tears welled in her eyes. I never meant to hurt you. It's how things have always been. We maintain appearances. It's what the Blackwoods do. While accumulating crushing debt, apparently, Victoria added, reaching for the decanter on Richard's desk and pouring herself another drink. I don't understand, David said, looking around the room. If you're in financial trouble, why not just say so? Why all the pretense? Because people like us don't admit failure, Richard replied stiffly. We find solutions. And what solution did you have in mind for my son? I asked quietly. His award money? His growing career? Richard had the grace to look ashamed. It wasn't like that. David is talented. His connection to our family would have been mutually beneficial. Beneficial? David's voice rose. You were planning to use me to solve your financial problems? Heather reached for him. David, please. It's more complicated than that. I love you. Do you? He asked, stepping back. Or am I just another potential solution? Tears streamed down Heather's face. Both, she whispered. And I hate myself for it. The raw honesty of her answer seemed to surprise even her family. I felt a sudden wave of compassion for this beautiful, broken family trapped in a prison of their own making. I think David and I should leave now, I said gently. You clearly have a lot to discuss as a family. As we turned to go, Victoria called after me. You knew, didn't you? That's why you came dressed like that, talking like that. You were testing us. I met her Chaza steadily. Yes. Why? Because I love my son, I replied simply. And I wanted to see who you really were before he joined your family. And now you know, she said bitterly. We're frauds, maintaining the appearance of wealth while drowning in debt. Does that make you happy? No. I told her honestly. It makes me sad. Because underneath all this pretense, you might actually be people worth knowing. I was surprised to see something like respect flicker in Victoria's eyes before David and I walked out of the Blackwood mansion, leaving Heather sobbing in the grand entrance hall that her family would soon lose. In the car, David was silent for a long time, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I feel so stupid, he finally said. You're not stupid, I assured him. You just fell in love with someone who wasn't who she claimed to be. Did you know from the beginning? Is that why you put on this act? I shook my head. I suspected something wasn't right, but I had no idea their situation was this dire. I just wanted to see how they'd treat someone they thought was beneath them socially. And now you've seen, he said grimly, though I guess they're actually beneath us, financially speaking. Money isn't what makes a person worthy, David. You know that. He nodded slowly. I thought I loved her, Mom. Maybe you did, I said gently. And maybe she loves you too, in her way. But relationships built on lies rarely survive. As we drove away from the Blackwood estate, I couldn't help but wonder what would become of that family, particularly Heather, caught between loyalty to her family and genuine feelings for my son. Before we continue with what happened when I got back home and really started digging into the Blackwood family's background, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to see through someone's facade to protect a loved one? Drop a comment below about your experience, and don't forget to hit that like button if you're enjoying this true family drama. The story gets even more twisted from here. Once back in Nashville, I gave David space to process everything that had happened in Boston. He had canceled his return flight, opting to drive instead. Time to think, he'd said. I understood. Finding out your fiancée and her family had been manipulating you would require more than a few hours of reflection. Meanwhile, I had research to do. I started with what I already knew about the Blackwoods. Richard had claimed to run a successful investment firm, but the confrontation with Marcus suggested his business was in serious trouble. Victoria had supposedly come from old money. The estate had been in her family for generations, but something had clearly gone wrong with their finances. I reached out to Marianne Covington, who actually did serve on the Boston Symphony Board, unlike Victoria Blackwood. "Eleanor, darling! What a lovely surprise!" Marianne exclaimed when she answered my call. "Are you finally accepting my invitation to design my lake house?" "Soon, perhaps," I laughed. "Actually, I'm calling about something else. Do you know the Blackwood family in Boston? Richard and Victoria?" A pause. "The Blackwoods?" "Yes, vaguely. Victoria's family, the Prestons, were quite prominent once. Her father, Harlan Preston, was in banking. When he died about 15 years ago, there were rumors about mismanagement, but nothing definitive. And Richard? Nouveau riche. Married into the Preston name and connections. He had some success in real estate development in the 90s, but I haven't heard much about him lately." "Why do you ask?" "My son was engaged to their daughter." "Was?" Marianne caught the past tense. "It's complicated," I hedged. "What about their current social standing?" "Well, they're still invited to the major events. But," she lowered her voice, "there's been talk. They've resigned from several club memberships. Victoria stepped down from 3 charity boards last year, citing health concerns. But the rumor is they couldn't maintain the expected donation levels. And their annual summer gala, which used to be quite the event, hasn't happened for the past 2 years. After speaking with Marianne, I contacted several other connections in my network. As a successful interior designer, I'd built relationships with lawyers, real estate agents, and financial advisors across the country. Each conversation revealed another piece of the Blackwood puzzle. Richard's investment firm, Blackwood Capital, had indeed been successful once, specializing in commercial real estate development. But a series of poor investments beginning around 2008 had steadily eroded their portfolio. He'd taken increasingly desperate risks to recoup his losses, only digging himself deeper. Victoria's family money, once substantial, had apparently been dwindling for years before she even met Richard. Her father's mismanagement had left her with more debt than assets, though the Preston name still carried social weight in certain circles. The Blackwood estate, according to county records I accessed online, had 3 mortgages against it and was indeed in foreclosure proceedings. Their luxury cars were leased, not owned. Credit reports showed maxed-out cards and collection notices. What troubled me most was the pattern I began to discern regarding Heather. Through discreet inquiries, I learned she had been engaged once before, 2 years earlier, to a young surgeon named Christopher Bennett. Their engagement had ended abruptly, with Christopher breaking things off just months before the wedding. After some detective work, I obtained Christopher's contact information and reached out directly. "Dr. Bennett, my name is Eleanor Richardson. I apologize for contacting you out of the blue like this, but I'm calling about Heather Blackwood." Silence greeted me, then a heavy sigh. "I haven't heard that name in a while. How did you get this number?" "I'm the mother of Heather's fiancé, or former fiancé. The situation is still unclear." "Let me guess," Christopher said, his voice tired. "Your son discovered the Blackwoods aren't quite what they appear to be?" "Something like that," I admitted. "I'm trying to understand what we're dealing with." Christopher was initially reluctant to discuss his past relationship, but eventually opened up. "I met Heather at a charity event. She was beautiful, charming, seemingly from this perfect family. We got engaged after 6 months. Then things got strange." "Strange how?" "Richard started involving me in their family business discussions. Looking back, They were feeling me out, seeing how much capital I had access to. There were suggestions about joint investments, bringing me onto their family foundation board, which I later learned was essentially defunct. Victoria began hinting about how they could help my career if I helped them through a temporary financial setback. His story matched what we'd experienced with alarming precision. "What made you break things off?" I asked. I overheard a conversation between Heather and her father. They were discussing my trust fund and how quickly they could access it after the wedding. Heather was crying, saying she didn't want to do this anymore, that she actually cared about me. Richard told her they had no choice, that it was her responsibility to save the family. My heart sank for both Christopher and my son. "Do you think Heather was just following her family's instructions all along?" "That's the thing," Christopher replied, his voice softening. "I don't think it's that simple. I believe she did care for me, in her way. But she's been raised in this system. The Blackwoods use whatever tools they have to maintain their lifestyle and status, for generations, from what I gathered. And Heather was raised to be one of those tools." After thanking Christopher for his candor, I sat in my office, staring out at my garden as I processed everything I'd learned. The Blackwoods weren't simply social climbers or opportunists. They were a family dynasty in its death throes, desperately clinging to an identity and lifestyle that had been slipping away for years. And Heather had been groomed since childhood to be their salvation, using her beauty and charm to secure advantageous marriages that could infuse the family with fresh resources. My investigation also revealed something I hadn't expected: legal complaints against Richard Blackwood from former business associates alleging fraud and misrepresentation. Nothing had resulted in criminal charges, but several civil suits had been settled out of court, further draining the family's dwindling resources. I compiled everything I'd learned into a comprehensive file: financial records, legal documents, Christopher's statement, and my own observations. I needed to be prepared to show David concrete evidence, not just my suspicions and impressions. The most disturbing discovery came from my real estate contacts. Richard had recently been pursuing a development deal, the Harrington project, mentioned during our visit, that would have required significant upfront investment. According to my sources, he'd been seeking angel investors who could contribute at least $50,000 each, almost exactly the amount of David's architecture award. When David finally returned to Nashville 3 days later, he came directly to my house. He looked exhausted, his eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. "I've been driving around thinking," he said, accepting the cup of coffee I offered, trying to figure out what was real and what wasn't. "And?" He rubbed his face. "I don't know, Mom. Part of me thinks everything was a lie. But then I remember moments with Heather that felt genuine. Times when it was just the two of us, away from her family's influence." I nodded sympathetically. "I believe Heather does care for you, David. But I've learned some things that you need to know before you make any decisions about your relationship." I showed him the file I'd compiled, watching his expression shift from confusion to disbelief to anger as he worked his way through the evidence. "They were targeting my award money," he said flatly when he reached the information about Richard's investment scheme. $50,000. That's exactly what Heather kept emphasizing to her family. "I believe so," I confirmed gently. "And she's done this before. With Christopher." "It appears that way, yes." David stood abruptly, pacing my living room. "I can't believe I was so blind. The way they pumped me for information about my finances, my career prospects. It was so obvious in retrospect. Love makes us vulnerable," I said. "There's no shame in that." He stopped pacing, turning to face me. "You knew something was wrong from the beginning. That's why you put on that act." I sensed something was off, yes, but I had no idea how deep it went. "Why didn't you just tell me your concerns?" I sighed. "Would you have believed me? Or would you have thought I was just being judgmental about Heather's family?" He was quiet for a moment. "I probably wouldn't have listened," he admitted. "I was so caught up in her, in the world she represented. That's why I needed them to reveal themselves," I explained. "I knew if they were genuinely good people, they would treat me with respect regardless of my apparent social standing or financial situation. Their reaction would tell me everything I needed to know about their character." David sat back down heavily. "So what now? Do I just break it off? She's been calling and texting constantly." "That's your decision," I told him. But before you make it, I think you need all the facts, including a direct conversation with Heather, not about your relationship, but about the truth of her family's situation and their intentions toward you. You think I should confront her? I think you deserve honesty, and perhaps she deserves a chance to provide it. David nodded slowly. You're right. I need to hear it from her. As he gathered the documents, preparing to leave, he paused. Mom? Thank you. For seeing what I couldn't see. For protecting me, even when I didn't know I needed protection. I hugged my son tightly. That's what mothers do, sweetheart. Even when our children are grown. After he left, I stood at my window watching his car disappear down the street, wondering what would happen when he confronted Heather with everything we'd learned. I hoped, for both their sakes, that she would choose truth over the facade her family had maintained for so long. 2 days after showing David the evidence I'd gathered, my phone rang. The caller ID displayed a Boston area code, but not a number I recognized. Eleanor Richardson speaking. Mrs. Richardson? It's Heather. Heather Blackwood. Her voice was subdued, lacking the polished confidence I'd come to associate with her. Heather, I replied neutrally. This is unexpected. I know. David showed me the file you compiled about my family. About me. I see. He broke off our engagement, she continued, her voice catching. He said he couldn't build a future on lies. I'm sorry it came to that, I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I took no joy in young hearts being broken. A pause. Are you? Sorry, I mean? Yes, Heather, I am. I didn't want to hurt you. I just needed to protect my son. She was quiet for so long, I thought we'd lost the connection. Then, I understand that now. That's actually why I'm calling. I'd like to meet with you. In person. There are things I need to say. Explanations I owe you. And David. But he won't take my calls anymore. I considered her request. I'm not sure that's necessary, Heather. What's done is done. Please, Mrs. Richardson. Eleanor. I'm not asking for another chance with David. I need someone to understand. And I think you might be the only person who could. Something in her voice, a raw vulnerability I'd never heard before, swayed me. All right, I agreed. When would you like to meet? I'm at the Nashville airport now. I flew in this morning. Surprised by her initiative, I gave her my address, and she arrived at my home an hour later. The young woman who stepped onto my porch was almost unrecognizable from the polished socialite I'd met in Boston. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face free of makeup, her designer clothes replaced by jeans and a plain sweater. Thank you for seeing me, she said softly as I invited her in. I led her to my sunroom, where the afternoon light streamed through large windows overlooking my garden. As we settled into comfortable chairs, I noticed Heather taking in her surroundings with new eyes. Your home is beautiful, she said. Warm. Authentic. Like you. Thank you, I replied, serving tea from a pot I'd prepared. Now, what did you want to discuss? Heather cupped her hands around the teacup as if drawing strength from its warmth. First, I want to apologize. For the deception, for my family's behavior, for everything. I appreciate that. When David confronted me with your file, I didn't try to deny anything. I couldn't anymore. The relief of finally telling the truth was... She shook her head, overwhelming. The truth can be like that, I observed. She took a deep breath. I need you to know that my feelings for David are real. Were real. Are real. I don't even know how to say it anymore. But they are. I believe you. Surprise flickered across her face. You do? I've watched you with my son. There was genuine affection there. But affection, tangled with duty and desperation, is a complicated thing. Tears welled in her eyes. You understand more than I expected. I've lived longer than you, Heather. Seen more of human nature, its complexities and contradictions. She nodded, wiping away a tear. My family. We've been playing this game for so long. I barely remember what it's like to be honest about who we are. What we have. What we don't have. How long has your family been in financial trouble? It started before I was born, she admitted. My grandfather, Mother's father, made some disastrous investments in the 70s. By the time Mother married Father, the Preston fortune was mostly gone. Just the house, and the name remained. And Richard? His business? He had some success early in his career, enough to maintain appearances. But then came the financial crisis in 2008, and everything fell apart. Rather than admit defeat and scale back, my parents doubled down. More debt, more risky investments, always believing the next deal would save us. I nodded, understanding the pattern. And your role in all this? Heather's expression turned pained. I was raised to be the family's asset, pretty, accomplished, well-connected, at least in appearance. The perfect catch who could attract the right kind of husband. Like Christopher Bennett. She flinched at the name. You spoke to him? Yes. Then you know how that ended. She stared into her teacup. I did care for Christopher, just like I care for David. But my parents made it clear from the time I was a teenager that my marriage would need to serve the family's interests. That's a heavy burden to place on a child. Heather laughed bitterly. In my family's social circle, it's not uncommon. Many of my friends from boarding school had similar expectations placed on them. The difference is, their families actually had the wealth to back up their status. We were just pretending. What happened after Christopher broke things off? It was devastating. Not just the heartbreak, but the family fallout. Father was counting on access to Christopher's trust fund to save us from foreclosure the first time. When that fell through, he had to take loans from some unsavory sources. And then David came along. She nodded. I met him at that architecture awards ceremony. He was so different from the men in my social circle. Genuine, passionate about his work, unimpressed by names and connections. A small smile touched her lips. I fell for him almost immediately. But you still told your family about his award money. The smile vanished. Yes, I'm ashamed of that now. It was reflex identifying potential resources for the family. Father was excited about the architecture prize, but more about David's growing firm and his potential future earnings. The Blackwood name could open doors for him, make him successful beyond his dreams. In return, his income would help stabilize our situation. A business arrangement disguised as a marriage. That's how my parents saw it, she acknowledged. But I wanted both. The fairy tale and the practical solution. I thought I could make David happy while still fulfilling my family obligation. Until your father's plans became too obvious. Until your visit exposed everything, she corrected me. You saw through us immediately, didn't you? With your little character test. I suspected something wasn't right, I admitted. Though I didn't anticipate just how wrong things were. Heather set down her teacup. When you showed up dressed like that, talking like that, my parents were appalled. But I was watching you, Mrs. Richardson. The way you noticed things, the deliberate mistakes with the cutlery, the careful questions you asked. You're much more sophisticated than you pretended to be. Just as you're more genuine than you've been allowed to be, I suggested. Her eyes widened slightly. Perhaps. What happens now, Heather? With your family? She sighed heavily. The estate is being sold next month. Father is trying to negotiate terms to avoid bankruptcy, but it's likely inevitable. Mother has gone to stay with her sister in Connecticut. James is supposedly interviewing for positions in New York, though I doubt he'll find anything without Father's connections. Elizabeth is engaged to a man twice her age, with considerable wealth, continuing the family tradition. And you? I'm breaking the cycle, she said with sudden determination. After Christopher, after David. I can't do it anymore. I can't keep lying, pretending to be something I'm not, using people who care about me. That's a brave decision. It doesn't feel brave. It feels necessary. For my sanity, for any chance at a real life. She hesitated. Actually, that's the other reason I wanted to see you. I need advice. From me? Yes. You built a successful business from nothing after your husband died. You raised 3 accomplished children. You're respected for who you are, not for your family name or connections. I want that kind of authenticity. I studied her thoughtfully. Beneath the polish and the practiced charm, I saw something I hadn't noticed before. Strength. And a desperate desire for change. What are your skills, Heather? Your genuine interests, not the accomplishments your parents cultivated for social currency? She considered this seriously. I have degrees in art history and business administration. I've managed several charity events, handling budgets, vendor relations, marketing. I'm actually quite good at it, even though it was always for show. And I love working with people, building relationships, real ones, not just strategic connections. Event planning? Public relations? Those are viable career paths. Do you really think so? Her voice held a fragile hope. With the right guidance, absolutely. Would you? She hesitated, then squared her shoulders. Would you be willing to mentor me? Help me find my footing in the real world? I'd understand if you refused, after everything, but I don't know who else to ask. The request caught me off guard. Heather, I'm the last person you should want advice from. I exposed your family, ended your engagement. You were honest, she interrupted. You protected your son. You saw the truth and weren't afraid to act on it. Those are qualities I desperately need to learn. I found myself touched by her sincerity. Let me think about it. That's fair. She nodded, rising to leave. At the door, she turned back. One more thing. I know David won't see me, but could you give him a message? That depends on the message. Just tell him I'm sorry. Not for loving him that was real, but for everything else. And that I'm going to become someone worthy of the love he offered. Even if it's too late for us. As I watched her walk to her rental car, shoulders straight despite everything, I felt an unexpected respect for Heather Blackwood. She'd been raised in a toxic environment, groomed to perpetuate a family legacy of deception, yet here she was, trying to break free. I wasn't sure if I would agree to mentor her, or if David would ever forgive her betrayal. But I believed in the possibility of redemption, of second chances. After all, everyone deserves the opportunity to become more than the mistakes of their past or the mistakes of their family. A week after my surprising meeting with Heather, David called to ask if he could come over for dinner. There's something I need to discuss, he said, his voice unreadable over the phone. I prepared his favorite meal, my grandmother's recipe for chicken and dumplings, and waited anxiously for his arrival. When he walked through the door, I was struck by how tired he looked. But there was also a new resolve in his expression. Heather reached out to you, he stated without preamble as we sat at my kitchen table. I nodded. She did. She came to see me last week. Why didn't you tell me? I wasn't sure what you wanted to hear about her, I admitted. And she asked me to give you a message, but I needed time to decide if I should. What message? I relayed Heather's words exactly as she'd spoken them. That she was sorry, that her love had been real, and that she was working to become someone worthy of the love he'd offered. David was quiet for a long time, pushing food around his plate. Do you believe her? About which part? Any of it. All of it. I considered the question carefully. I believe she genuinely cares for you. I believe she's genuinely sorry. And I believe she genuinely wants to change. But change is hard, especially when you're breaking away from patterns established over generations. And genuine feelings don't erase the harm that was done. He nodded slowly. She sent me an email. Returned the engagement ring via courier. The email said she wasn't asking for forgiveness or another chance, just wanted me to know the full truth. And what truth was that? Everything. Her family's financial situation going back decades. The expectations placed on her since childhood. Her previous engagement to Christopher. The pressure from her father to target my award money for his Harrington investment scheme. He looked up at me. She didn't hold anything back, Mom. It was brutal in its honesty. That must have been difficult to read. It was. But also clarifying, in a way. I've been so confused, trying to separate what was real from what was manipulation. Her email helped me understand that it wasn't black and white. She did care for me, but she was also using me. She was both victim and perpetrator. I reached across the table to squeeze his hand. Human relationships are rarely simple, David, especially when they're shaped by family dynamics as complex as the Blackwoods. She mentioned you might be mentoring her. I was surprised Heather had shared that tentative conversation with him, she asked. I haven't decided yet. You should, he said, surprising me further. She needs someone like you in her life, someone with integrity. That's generous of you, considering everything she put you through. He shrugged. I'm still angry, still hurt. But I also remember the moments when she seemed trapped by her family's expectations. Moments when I glimpsed a different Heather struggling to break free. Those glimpses were real, I confirmed, just as your love for her was real. Not real enough to overcome everything else. Apparently, he said with a sad smile. We ate in silence for a while, the weight of everything that had happened settling between us. Finally, David set down his fork and looked at me directly. I need to ask you something, Mom. And I need complete honesty. Of course, why didn't you just tell me your concerns about Heather from the beginning? Why the elaborate deception with her family? I took a deep breath. Because I know my son. If I had come to you with vague suspicions or secondhand gossip, you would have defended Heather, probably accused me of being elitist or judgmental. You were in love, and love doesn't always listen to reason. So instead, you created this whole character to test them? I created a situation where they would reveal their true character. I corrected gently. If the Blackwoods had been genuinely good people who happened to care about social status, they still would have treated me with basic respect and dignity, regardless of my apparent circumstances. Their contempt revealed who they really were. But you lied too, he pointed out. Isn't that hypocritical? Perhaps, I acknowledged. I'm not claiming moral perfection, David. I made a judgment call to protect my child. Was it manipulative? Yes. Would I do it again? In a heartbeat, if it meant saving you from tying yourself to a family that would have exploited your success and destroyed your financial security. David pushed back from the table, standing to pace my kitchen as he had during our previous conversation. I feel like such a fool. All those red flags I ignored. Heather's obsession with appearances. The way Richard kept pressing me about my firm's expansion plans. Victoria's constant hints about how the right connections could accelerate my career. You weren't a fool. You were in love. There's a difference. He stopped pacing, turning to face me. Did I ever tell you why I fell for Heather? I don't believe you did. She saw my designs differently than anyone else ever had, not as buildings or investments, but as expressions of emotion. She understood what I was trying to create before I could even articulate it myself. His voice softened with the memory. The first time I showed her my sketches for the Community Arts Center, the project that won the award, she said it felt like hope made tangible. That's exactly what I was trying to convey. She understood you, I said quietly. She did. That part wasn't an act. He ran a hand through his hair. That's what makes this so confusing. How could someone who saw me so clearly also see me as a means to an end? People are complicated, David. We can hold contradictory truths simultaneously, like Heather loving me while also targeting me for my money. Yes, like me lying to protect you from liars. He laughed suddenly, the tension in the room breaking. We're a mess, aren't we? Gloriously human, I agreed, smiling. Just then, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, his expression shifting from amusement to wariness. It's Richard Blackwood. Are you going to answer it? David hesitated, then hit the decline button. No. Whatever he's selling, I'm not buying. But the phone rang again, almost immediately. This time, David answered and put it on speaker. Mr. Blackwood, I have nothing to say to you, he said flatly. David, please. Richard's voice sounded desperate, none of the smooth confidence remaining. Just hear me out. I know things ended badly with Heather, but the Harrington deal is still viable. We can still make this work. Make what work, exactly? Our partnership. Your investment. The opportunity I discussed with you in Boston. David's eyes met mine, incredulous. Are you serious right now? After everything that's happened, you're still trying to get my money? It's not like that, Richard insisted. This is a legitimate business opportunity, one that could benefit both of us. Mr. Blackwood, I've seen the documents. I know about your financial situation, the lawsuits, the foreclosure. I know you targeted me because of my award money. Silence. Then, who told you that? Heather? She's confused, emotional. You can't trust. Goodbye, Mr. Blackwood. David interrupted, ending the call. He stared at his phone for a moment, then started laughing a genuine, if slightly hysterical, laugh. Unbelievable. The man is absolutely unbelievable. Some people can't change their patterns, even when they're clearly not working, I observed. David sobered. Do you think Heather can? Change her patterns. I think she wants to, and that's the essential first step. My phone pinged with a text notification. When I checked it, I was surprised to see it was from Heather. Did you speak with David? Is he okay? I showed the message to David. Should I respond? He thought for a moment, then nodded. Tell her I'm going to be fine, and tell her I hope she finds what she's looking for. As I typed the response, David watched me with a pensive expression. You're really considering mentoring her, aren't you? I'm considering it, I confirmed. Not for her family's sake, but for hers. Everyone deserves a chance to become more than their circumstances or their mistakes. Even someone who broke your son's heart, especially someone who recognizes the harm they've caused and wants to do better. I sent the text and set my phone down. But my priority is you, David. If my having any contact with Heather would be painful for you, I won't do it. He was quiet for a long moment. No, you should help her if you want to. Just because she and I can't be together doesn't mean she doesn't deserve a chance at a better life. His generosity of spirit made my heart swell with pride. You're a good man, David Richardson. I had a good teacher, he replied, smiling at me. A wise woman who once pretended to be poor and naive to expose the truth. As we finished our dinner, the tension that had been present since the Boston debacle finally began to ease. The wound was still fresh, but healing had begun. For both of us, and somewhere across town, I suspected Heather Blackwood was beginning her own journey toward healing and authenticity, one painful truth at a time. Over the next few months, news of the Blackwood family's collapse trickled in through various sources. Heather, with whom I was now in regular contact as her unofficial mentor, kept me updated on major developments, while my own network provided additional details. The Blackwood estate sold at auction for less than half its appraised value, insufficient to cover their outstanding debts. Richard's investment firm, Blackwood Capital, filed for bankruptcy protection amid allegations of mismanagement and fraudulent representations to investors. Victoria, after a brief stay with her sister, checked herself into an exclusive rehabilitation facility in Arizona, supposedly for exhaustion, but according to Heather, to address a long-standing dependence on alcohol and anti-anxiety medication. James Blackwood, who had indeed secured a position at a New York financial firm through his father's dwindling connections, lasted barely 3 months before being dismissed. Shortly thereafter, he was named in a lawsuit by former investors in one of Richard's failed ventures, accused of misrepresenting financial projections to potential backers. He eventually fled to Europe to avoid mounting legal troubles. Elizabeth, true to family tradition, married her wealthy older fiancé in a ceremony that Heather described as embarrassingly lavish for a family that's basically bankrupt. The marriage appeared to be a nakedly transactional arrangement, with Elizabeth securing financial stability in exchange for youth and social connections. Richard himself made one last desperate attempt to salvage his reputation and finances. 2 weeks after our dinner conversation, David received a certified letter from Richard's attorney threatening legal action for defamation and tortious interference with business relationships. According to the letter, David's false statements about Richard's business practices had caused the collapse of the Harrington deal. David brought the letter to me, more amused than concerned. Can you believe this? After everything, he's trying to blame me for his failures. I contacted my own attorney, who assured us the threat was baseless. It's a common tactic from desperate people, she explained. They hope you'll pay them to go away, rather than deal with the hassle of legal proceedings. At my lawyer's recommendation, we sent a formal response detailing the evidence we had gathered about Richard's business practices and financial situation, including statements from former investors and documentation of the foreclosure proceedings. We concluded by making it clear that if Richard pursued legal action, we would be forced to make all this information public record through court filings. We never heard from Richard or his attorney again. Heather, meanwhile, was forging her own path, separate from her family's drama. After our first few mentoring sessions, I helped her secure an entry-level position with a Nashville event planning company whose owner was a former client of mine. She moved into a modest apartment, began therapy to address the complicated legacy of her upbringing, and enrolled in evening classes to enhance her business management skills. It's strange, she told me during one of our regular coffee meetings. I feel like I'm starting from scratch at 28, learning how to be a real person with real relationships, not just strategic connections. You're not starting from scratch, I corrected her. You're building on the genuine parts of yourself that were always there, just hidden beneath the facade your family required you to maintain. Sometimes I don't know which parts are real and which are performance, she admitted. I've been playing a role for so long. That's what therapy is for, I reminded her gently. And time. And practice being authentic. She nodded, then asked the question she'd been carefully avoiding for months. How is David? I considered how much to share. David was aware of my mentoring relationship with Heather and had never asked me not to discuss him, but I still felt protective of his privacy. He's doing well, I said carefully. Focusing on his work. His firm just won a major commission for a sustainable mixed-use development downtown. I saw the announcement in the Business Journal, she said. I'm happy for him. He deserves every success. He's seeing someone, I added, watching her reaction. A landscape architect he met through work. It's relatively new, but he seems happy. Pain flickered across her face, quickly masked. Good. That's good. I want him to be happy. I reached across the table to squeeze her hand. Healing takes time, Heather. For both of you. I know. I'm not expecting forgiveness or reconciliation. I just want to know he's okay. He is, and from what I can see, you're getting there too. She gave me a small smile. Thanks to you. I don't know where I'd be if you hadn't agreed to help me. You'd be figuring it out on your own, I assured her. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for. As our mentoring relationship evolved, I found myself genuinely fond of Heather. Stripped of the social climbing and family pressure, she revealed herself to be intelligent, hardworking, and surprisingly funny. Her insights into people and relationships, honed through years of strategic social navigation, proved valuable in her new career, once redirected toward authentic connection rather than manipulation. She maintained minimal contact with her parents, speaking to Victoria occasionally, but keeping firm boundaries around what support she was willing to provide. She refused Richard's requests for loans or investments, and declined Victoria's hints about moving back to the East Coast to help rebuild the family's social standing. I love them because they're my parents, she explained. But I can't be their salvation anymore. 6 months after the breakup, Heather and David unexpectedly encountered each other at a charity gala, where her event planning company was managing logistics, and his firm had designed the venue. According to both of them, each related their version to me separately. The meeting was awkward but civil. She looked different, David told me afterward. More genuine somehow, less perfect but more real. He seemed at peace, was Heather's observation. I'm glad for that, even if it hurts to know I'm not part of his life anymore. Their brief interaction marked a turning point. The acute pain of betrayal began to transmute into something more nuanced. A shared history, a lesson learned, a chapter closed but not forgotten. By the 1-year anniversary of our fateful visit to Boston, the Blackwood family had completely unraveled. Richard was working as a consultant for a small real estate firm in Chicago, a significant step down from his former prestige, but at least legitimate employment. Victoria had completed rehab and was living in a condo provided by her new son-in-law, reportedly focused on her gardening and volunteer work at a local hospital. James had surfaced in London, claiming to be launching a tech startup, but, according to Heather's sources, primarily living off a girlfriend with family money. Elizabeth appeared to have fully embraced her role as trophy wife, documenting her luxury lifestyle on social media while carefully avoiding any mention of her disgraced family name. And Heather? She had been promoted to project manager at the event planning firm, earned a professional certification in business management, and expanded her social circle to include people who knew nothing about the Blackwoods or their former status. She had even started dating again, casually, carefully, with full transparency about her past and her ongoing journey toward authentic living. The irony, she said during one of our now monthly lunches, is that I'm happier now than I ever was as a Blackwood heiress. I have less, but it's real. I own my furniture, not my family. I earned my job, not my status. That's not irony, I corrected her. That's growth. As for David, the pain of Heather's betrayal had matured into wisdom. He approached new relationships with both openness and healthy skepticism, neither closing himself off from connection nor abandoning his critical thinking. His relationship with the landscape architect had ended amicably after a few months, but he was dating again, taking things slowly and thoughtfully. Most importantly, our mother-son relationship had emerged stronger from the crucible of the Blackwood experience. David no longer saw my protective instincts as interference, but as an expression of love, and I had learned to trust his judgment while still offering guidance when asked. The most unexpected outcome of my little performance as a poor and naive mother was the friendship that had developed between Heather and me. What began as mentorship had evolved into genuine affection and mutual respect. I admired her courage in breaking free from toxic family patterns, and she valued my no-nonsense guidance and unconditional support. I sometimes wondered what would have happened if I hadn't decided to test the Blackwoods that weekend in Boston. If I had arrived as myself, successful, confident, well-dressed, would their facade have held? Would David have married Heather, only to discover the truth after it was too late? Or would Heather have found another way to break free from her family's expectations? There's no way to know for certain. But I believe my motherly instinct to protect my son, combined with my willingness to put my own dignity on the line by playing a character designed to trigger the Blackwoods' worst instincts, saved David from a painful marriage and financial exploitation. And, ironically, it also saved Heather, giving her the push she needed to escape the destructive patterns that had defined her family for generations. Sometimes, the most naive-seeming actions require the most courage. And sometimes, the facades we construct to protect ourselves and those we love reveal more truth than any amount of straightforward communication could hope to achieve. 3 years have passed since I wore my gardening clothes and played up my Southern accent to test the Blackwood family. Today, as I celebrate my 66th birthday surrounded by friends and family in my backyard, I find myself reflecting on the unexpected ways that single decision changed so many lives. David has arrived with Melissa, the woman he's been dating for the past year. She's an environmental engineer who shares his passion for sustainable design, and watching them together, the easy laughter, the respectful communication, the genuine partnership fills my heart with joy. They're discussing marriage, not rushing, but moving forward with clear eyes and open hearts. My other children are here too. Margaret with her husband and 2 children, Thomas with his newest tech innovation he's eager to demonstrate. Our family has always been close, but there's a new appreciation for our honesty with each other, our willingness to speak difficult truths when necessary. And yes, Heather is here as well, arriving with a beautiful arrangement of flowers and a warm hug. David invited her himself, a sign of how far healing has progressed for both of them. They'll never be a couple again, but they've found a way to honor what was genuine in their relationship while acknowledging the painful lessons learned. Heather now runs her own event management company, specializing in nonprofit fundraisers and community celebrations. She's built her business on integrity and transparency, values she once pretended to embody but now genuinely lives by. She's dating a kind music producer who knows her full story and loves her for the person she's become, not the persona she once projected. As for the Blackwoods, their story continues to unfold in ways both predictable and surprising. Richard and Victoria finally divorced last year, the strain of financial collapse and public humiliation ultimately breaking their pragmatic alliance. Richard has remarried a wealthy widow 20 years his senior, and appears to be falling back into familiar patterns, though with diminished social capital to leverage. Victoria, surprisingly, has undergone perhaps the most genuine transformation. After rehab and divorce, she moved to a small coastal town in Maine, where she lives modestly in a cottage with a spectacular garden. According to Heather, who visits occasionally, Victoria has found peace in simplicity, rediscovering her authentic self beneath the social climbing and status anxiety that defined most of her adult life. James eventually returned to the States to face legal consequences for his role in his father's business dealings. After a plea agreement, he served 6 months in a minimum security facility and is now working an entry-level position at a friend's company, slowly rebuilding his life without the shortcuts and manipulations that once defined his approach. Elizabeth remains married to her wealthy older husband, playing the role she was groomed for since childhood. But Heather tells me her sister has developed unexpected depth through charitable work, finding purpose in philanthropy that goes beyond social posturing. Whether this represents genuine growth or another sophisticated performance is difficult to determine from a distance. As twilight descends on my birthday gathering, candles are lit around the garden, casting a warm glow over the faces of those I love. David catches my eye across the patio and raises his glass in a subtle toast. an acknowledgement of our shared journey and the wisdom gained. Later, as guests begin to depart, Heather helps me collect empty plates and glasses. "I never thanked you properly," she says quietly. "For what?" "For seeing through us. For exposing the lie we were living. It was painful, but necessary." I touch her arm gently. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is tell the truth, even when it hurts. "I've learned that from you," she smiles. Along with so much else. After Heather leaves, David and I sit alone on the porch swing, watching fireflies rise from the garden like earthbound stars. "Do you ever regret it?" he asks. "The deception? The performance?" I consider the question seriously. I regret that it hurt you, that it was necessary at all. But no, I don't regret protecting my son. I don't regret revealing the truth behind the Blackwood facade. Even though it cost me Heather, did it? Or did it free both of you to become more authentic versions of yourselves? He's quiet for a moment. Maybe both. Life is full of paradoxes like that, I observe. Sometimes we lose what we thought we wanted only to gain what we truly needed. Wisdom. From Eleanor Richardson, he teases. Always delivered with perfect timing. I laugh and squeeze his hand. Not perfect. Just experienced. As we sit together in comfortable silence, I reflect on the strange irony that my deliberate performance, as someone I'm not, ultimately led to everyone involved becoming more authentically themselves. By pretending to be less than I was, I revealed the truth about the Blackwoods, not just to David, but to Heather, who found the courage to break free from generations of deception. My new tradition, since that fateful weekend in Boston, is simple. Always show up as my authentic self, no matter the situation or expectations. The real Eleanor Richardson, neither exaggerating my success nor diminishing my worth, is exactly who I need to be. And sometimes, that authentic self includes being a mother who will go to extraordinary lengths to protect her children from harm, even if it means temporarily becoming someone else entirely. What about you? Have you ever had to take dramatic steps to protect someone you love from a toxic situation? Or have you been the one who needed to break free from harmful family patterns? Your experiences matter, and I'd love to hear them in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life family drama stories with important life lessons. And if you know someone who might benefit from hearing how appearances can be deceiving in relationships, please share this video with them. Thank you for joining me on this journey. I truly appreciate each and every one of you who takes the time to listen to my experiences.